Hello everyone, do you want to know if a servant is good enough to spend your hard-earned sync quartz on? Great, you're in the right place, let me tell you. The information you need to know. Welcome to the FGO Gacha Guide. Today, our topic servant is the hero of Homer's epic The Odyssey, Odysseus. We will cover the points that you can see on screen, but before we get into these, fun little fact with Odysseus, he is the one credited for coming up with the idea of the Trojan horse, which eventually was what led to the conquering and toppling of Troy. Smart lad, that guy. Smart lad. Now, on to my personal opinion. I personally think that Odysseus is pretty darn good. He has good party buffing skills, a self-MP charge, a very interesting taunt, actually I would call it the best taunt in the game, good defense, a high damage NP, especially for an art servant. His biggest weakness is being an AoE art servant who has a little bit of trouble looping. He does need a little bit more help than your average art servant for looping due to the low hit count on it. Now, let's pop into his stats, and we will see that he is a 5-star Rider class servant, meaning he's super effective against casters and weak against assassins. His attack at level 90 is 11,795, which is a little above average for 5-star servants, while his HP is 13,284, which is quite a bit below average for a 5-star servant. His hidden stats show that his NP gain on hit is 0.58%, about average. As for his cards, he has 4 hits on the quick cards, 4 hits on the arts cards, 3 hits on the buster card, and 5 hits on his extra card. This is around an average hit count overall. His star absorption, aka how easy it is for him to get critical stars on his cards over other servants' cards, is 208, which is amongst the tippity top in this stat. It is extremely easy to get stars on this man over other servants. His star creation rate is 8.9%, which is a little bit below average. All in all, his stats come out relatively average. Nothing particularly amazing or detrimental about his stats. Moving on, we'll take a look at his deck in NP. His deck consists of 2 arts cards, 2 quick cards, and 1 buster card, a non-standard 2-1-2 deck that has an extra quick card over a buster card. And his noble phantasm, Troya Hippos Colossal Trojan Horse of Obliteration, is a 3-hit AoE arts NP that summons a giant mecha Trojan horse, removes all enemies' defensive buffs before dealing damage, and increases his NP damage for 1 turn by 30 to 70% based on your overcharge before dealing damage. This is a very strong MP. On top of removing any possible defenses before dealing damage, it also has a potentially massive damage buff if you can get that overcharge for him. The big winner out of his MP here is the AoE defense buff Shred. It's a very helpful for certain challenge quests to get through AoE evades, AoE invincibilities, or just straight defense up or damage reduction, making him a very powerful AoE servant to bring onto any challenge quests with multiple enemies. Next up, we have his passives. First off, we have Magic Resistance B, giving him 17.5% increased debuff resistance, Riding B+, increasing his own quick performance by 9%, and Protection of the Messenger God B. This gives him immunity to Kirke's Pigify debuff on her MP, along with increasing his arts performance by 10%. Obviously, the good stuff here are Riding and Protection of the Messenger God, buffing his cards, buffing his NP on the ladder, as well as 2 of his cards, and it also makes him a hard counter if you ever have to face Kirke. Not only does he have the class advantage, but he also has this debuff immunity to her MP. Honestly, she's not the most common servant fight out there, so really not going to find that terribly useful. This is mostly just a 10% arts buff. Now let's take a look at his skills. First off, we have Insight of the Cunning General. This will increase the party's quick and arts performance for 3 turns by 10 to 20% each, along with giving a 500% taunt to all party members except for 1 for 3 turns. This is one of very, very few multi-turn taunt skills, and it works on multiple allies. This means that you can guarantee one ally's safety for 3 turns, or alternatively, If you have the ability to swap a unit out, you can put the taunt onto 2 units, swap one of those taunted units out, sacrifice the first unit, and then the next unit gets swapped back in upon that death for a total of up to 6 turns of taunt to protect your other units. This is an incredibly powerful skill when combined with ally swapping due to the ability to prevent just any sort of opponent targeting something you don't want them to. For 6 turns. 6 turns is so much time. That's more than enough to clear through most challenge quests, as long as you have enough firepower. And it lets you be a lot more reckless with the kind of servants you bring, making it safer to bring the likes of berserkers that normally would get themselves killed pretty quickly. Next up, skill number 2, we have Single-Mindedness Love. This charges his MP gauge by 20 to 30%. Increases his critical star absorption by 500 to 1000% for 1 turn, and gives him charm debuff immunity for 5 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. This is basically a permanent charm immunity buff as long as you're willing to use the skill off cooldown, so that's a very nice bonus to a decent NP charge skill. The crit star absorption is not much of an upside, since he doesn't have any crit damage increase in his kit, so if anything, it's possibly more of a downside. It just means you shouldn't rely on crits in your team composition if you're bringing Odysseus. And finally, we have his 3rd skill, Aegis, Divine Body Boundary Field. This grants Odysseus invincibility for 1 turn, gives him a 50 to 100% buff removal resistance for 1 turn, and increases his defense by 20 to 30% for 3 turns. It's an okay defensive skill. A couple 1-turn only buffs, a defense up, it's nothing that impressive. It's definitely his weakest skill when you get right down to it. As you can see by his skills and MP, Odysseus is built to buff himself and his allies, be a hard-hitting MP user while he does it, and most importantly, choose at least one ally that will not get attacked for multiple turns. He can be used as an AoE MP spammer for farming, with a little extra help than usual, or be an invaluable member for challenge quests, again offering up to 6 turns of taunt to protect certain allies. He's also quite good as a semi-support due to the abilities that he has, the buffs that he can give to his teammates. He's definitely a strong ally to bring to just about any circumstance, kind of almost a jack-of-all-trades kind of servant. So what kind of materials do we need to level these skills? Well, I've got relatively good news, everyone. Odysseus is pretty darn cheap. We only need 15 horseshoes, 15 eternal gears, 15 Dawnlight reactor cores, and 24 crowns of radiant silver per skill. Out of all of these materials, only the crowns are a fairly new material, having come out with Lost Belt 5 Atlantis. Other than that, these are fairly old materials, the most recent one besides being the Dawnlight reactor cores from Lost Belt 3. Which means that most people that have been playing the game for the past while will have no problem with leveling up his skills at all. To max him out, that will be 45 horseshoes, 45 gears, 45 reactor cores, and finally 72 crowns. So how does Odysseus stack up against his competition? As a 5-star AoE rider, his main competition comes down to Francis Drake, Iskander, Ivan the Terrible, Achilles, Lolly da Vinci, and Europa. When it comes to raw damage output, Odysseus does fall a little bit short of his colleagues, specifically the Buster competition coming in the likes of Drake, Iskander, Ivan, and even Europa. But he does outdo Achilles and Da Vinci when it comes to raw damage. His ability to loop is a little bit lesser than Da Vinci's, about on the same level as Achilles, maybe even a little lower than that. But it will be better than the Buster Riders, obviously, until Koyanskaya of the Light releases over a year later. At the time of his release, Odysseus is going to be quite good. As time goes on, he will remain useful, but will slowly be outdone by competition as new supports get added that help them out. But if you do choose to roll Odysseus, you'll want to know what skills to prioritize in your level ups if you can't just max them out right away. I believe your priority should look like this. We start with that second skill due to it being the NP charge skill, as usual. Then we move on to his first skill. It is not only a buff for himself, but a buff for the whole party, and on top of that, taunt for multiple turns to make use of. And finally, his third skill, which is honestly the weakest scaling skill, and is pretty good no matter the level. The only thing you're really gaining is some buff removal resistance if you're gonna happen to bring him to challenge fights where that's something you need to pay attention to. Now, as for craft essences to equip this man with, he is an AoE arts-focused servant who has looping potential, but needs a little extra help. The biggest focus to put on your your craft essence choices are arts increasing, NP generation rate increasing. Those are the two main stats to look for. Painting Summer is the best free craft essence to take, as it gives a 10% arts performance increase, a 10% NP generation rate increase, and a 50% starting NP gauge. So it brings the two main stats you want to look for, and a 50% starting NP gauge to make it easier to get the first NP off. You can also choose, if you rolled for the New Year's Gacha, Mark on a Smiling Face. This increases arts performance by 10 or 15% at max limit break, MP generation by 10 or 15% at max limit break, and MP damage by 15 or 20% at max limit break. While this does not provide him with the starting MP, it does give him a little bit of extra damage to work with. It's better as a challenge fight CE to bring on him, as opposed to a looping CE, than Painting Summer, and is a fine choice to make, but again, this is a CE you had to roll for. And finally, you can choose to bring the Black Grail once Castoria is out. If you're willing to bring a little bit of extra help along with double Castoria, the Black Grail is a very powerful CE that basically guarantees killing any line of enemies with its 60 or 80%, if you can max limit break it, NP damage increase. This is by far the highest raw damage increase you can throw onto him, but unlike certain other arts servants out there where you can just bring it on them and they're fine, Odysseus does need an extra bit of help than just Castor Artoria to be able to loop while also equipping the Black Grail, due to himself having a low number of hits on his MP and no buffs to increase his MP generation rate. Now, as for what servants to group Odysseus with, oh look, it's Waver! What a surprise! Hi, Waver, I didn't expect you here. 50% MP charge, attack up, critical damage up, defense up. It's a no-brainer. Moving along, we all know Waver's good. On his release, Tamamo no Mae will be the best arts supporter that you can possibly bring. She brings 3 turns of 50% arts increase, 3 turns of 30% MP damage increase. On top of that, if you want to go onto any sort of challenge quest, she's a fantastic servant because her NP itself will charge the MP of allies, heal allies, and lower their cooldown. The only thing that she isn't bringing when it comes to non-challenge fights is any sort of MP charge, which is why, when she releases, Castor Artoria will be by far the best support to bring with Odysseus. She brings 50% MP charge, 20% attack up for 3 turns, 30% MP generation rate increase for 3 turns, 50% arts increase for 3 turns. She is the best enabler for arts users in the game, and honestly just OP. Now, Paracelsus is your best budget support option, as he brings 20% arts up for 3 turns and 50% MP generation rate increase for 3 turns, and he even brings an 80% self-MP charge for an extra easy NP to help clear a wave or add some extra damage if you need to. He is definitely the best choice if you don't have one of these 5-star servants available to you. You can even toss Nero Bride in here. I didn't mention her specifically because Paracelsus does what she does, but for free. Simple as that. So a quick too long didn't watch here. Odysseus is good. This is a good servant to go for. He can loop. He has probably the best taunt skill in the game. He has a high MP damage. He has great AoE buffs for the team. He's a strong servant that can be used in just about any sort of situation. Pretty much a jack of all trades that, as long as you're not facing off against any sort of assassins, is going to do the job well and even excel at it. But if you need more reason to roll for him, you get a handsome man with boob window. And who doesn't want a handsome man with boob window in their lives? Let me know your opinions on Odysseus, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to follow me on my Twitch, join my Discord, follow on Twitter, all that stuff. Thank you everyone for watching. I will see you guys next time on the next Gacha Guide. Good luck on your rolls.